Welcome to Sputnik, with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
The plight of the Chagos Islanders, long championed by the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn incidentally, has been showcased on the Sputnik previously, via Ben Vogel and its president, Alan Venkatasan. But we just can't stay away from the Indian Ocean paradise, whose population was ethnically cleansed to the last man, woman and child by a British Labour government, so that the US could have a military base there.
In recent times, despite another Labour Foreign Secretary's denial, it has even been used, at the very least, as a staging post to the charnel house of the war on terror.
On Wednesday, thanks to our first guest and his party, the SNP, the British Parliament will be forced to confront the issue again. The Scottish National Party have secured a debate on the issue, which everyone should follow closely. That man is Dr. Paul Monaghan, MP for half of the Scottish Highlands. Dr. Paul, thanks for joining us. Just for those viewers who don't actually know what happened to the people of the Chagos, briefly describe it, please.
Oh, I'll try to. It's a long and interesting story. It goes back to the mid-60s. Just before the Seychelles Islands and Mauritius were made independent, the UK government annexed the Chagos Islands and forcibly expelled the inhabitants from those islands. Most of them moved to Mauritius, some of them came to the UK. The sad aspect is that their human rights weren't recognised in that process of expulsion, and they were persuaded to expel them on the basis that they were contract labourers. That's how they explained it to the world, against the facts, really. I think it's a damning indictment that the UK government persuaded the UK Parliament that these people were not Indigenous peoples.
It was a Labour government too, by the way.
It was Harold Wilson who authorised the expulsion, indeed. And they also persuaded the UN that they weren't Indigenous peoples either. So a real breach of human rights, and that fundamentally, I think, is the issue.
And the people have never accepted it.
The people of Chagos, the Chagossians, have never accepted it, and why should they? I think they're quite right to fight for their cause, quite right to fight for their islands, and quite right to fight for the right to return there and to re-establish themselves as a viable community.
Now, the Parliament is debating it, thanks to you and your party, the SNP. Congratulations on that, on Wednesday. What's going to be said, as it were, from your front bench? And what's the government likely to reply? I
think I should say, first of all, that it's not just about the SNP. I'm taking this forward under the auspices of the all-party parliamentary group on the Chagos Islands. That's one of the few all-party parliamentary groups in the UK Parliament that has full cross-party representation. So it's not just the SNP, it is every single political party at Westminster. What we want to do on Wednesday at the Westminster Hall debate is force the UK government, through the Minister for the Foreign Office, to come to the table to answer the questions about what is happening with the Chagos Islanders. And there are a number of specific issues that we want to highlight and discuss. Perhaps chief among them is the fact that next year, 2016, the UK government will be renegotiating the lease of Diego Garcia, which is the military base in the Indian Oceanic Territory that is leased by the UK to the American government. So that lease is going to be getting renegotiated. That, I think, prompts a debate about resettlement of the islands and under what terms that lease might be renewed. It's also the case that imminently the Supreme Court in the UK will be making a judgment on the right of the Chagossians to return to the island. That's imminent, as I say. It's looking very likely that the UK Supreme Court will rule in favour of the Chagossians, and again, that will force the UK government's hand in terms of implementing a programme of resettlement.
It's almost surreal that Harold Wilson, whom I must say I greatly admired, would have done such a thing to please the United States.
If you take a proper look at the history of this whole debacle, it seems that the UK government at the time, under Harold Wilson's leadership, was put under significant pressure to engage with the US government. And there is some suggestion that in leasing the Chagos Islands to the US government, sorry, that the UK received a discount on nuclear weapons at the time.
That's certainly been said. Another theory I have is that Wilson was refusing US requests to join the war in Vietnam and to support the Americans in the war in Vietnam. Wilson resisted that, and some say that his flexibility towards the US on the Chagos Islands was in a sense a quid pro quo. Either way, it's entirely shameful. Yeah. Not sure which of these two would be the most shameful, and it's time for the British government to do the right thing, isn't it? I mean, far from being contract labourers, these were an indigenous people, and Ben Fogle, sitting exactly where you are now, described to us how their houses are still there. I mean, practically the salt and pepper still on their tables. They were literally ethnically cleansed.
And in addition to that, the phenomenon of rich jet setters who can afford to visit these islands, people, these remote islands.
They pull in the Chagos, and instead of putting their tents up or sleeping on board the yacht, they sleep in the houses of the Chagossians who've been chased away.
That must be a big insult for the Chagossians, both in Mauritius and those residing here.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the Chagossians have been insulted many times over the last 50 years. As George says, it is absolutely at the point now where the UK government should be accepting responsibility for the actions of previous UK governments and starting to put things right. We're at that pivotal point now, I think, where there are several aspects coming together that suggest that the time is now appropriate to be discharging fully the human rights of the Chagossians and facilitating a viable resettlement on those islands for the people and their future.
Well, I'll tell you what we agreed with Ben Fogle, the famous television personality and very big on this issue. We agreed on our show that if the British government doesn't do the right thing at this pivot, this 2016 pivot, we're going to get ourselves somehow a big, beautiful boat with white sails, and we're all going to get on it.
Sail out there, yeah.
And we're going to sail out there with the Chagossian people and take it back. Who's going to shoot us down?
Well, nobody, I think.
Because they are actually British, yeah? They've got British passports.
They're UK citizens, absolutely, you're quite right. And I think, you're talking about the yachting industry. It's entirely unregulated. If you've got enough money, you can go to the Chagos Islands. So, the suggestion that the Chagos Islands can't be or shouldn't be used for visitors or tourism, things like that, I mean, it's just...
For environmental reasons.
It's a fallacy. It's
yes, that was another of the canards more recently drawn out that, we can't have people there because it's a sanctuary for all kinds of wildlife and flora and fauna, never mind the people who are stuck in Crawley under the flight path of the airplanes in Gatwick. How are you finding, you come from the third sector, how are you finding your time in Parliament? It's probably quite a culture shock coming into what is the oldest and best club in London, as they say.
I think the UK Parliament's an interesting place. You were obviously there for many, many years. It's not somewhere that I feel particularly comfortable, to be honest. I think as a Scottish National Party Member of Parliament, we clearly have an objective, which is to make the voice of Scotland heard in that place. It's to make sure that the people of Scotland have access to equitable and fair policies. That clearly spills over into other peoples, not least the Chagos Islands. So I think, the plight of the Chagossians is very much something that's in my mind and several of my colleagues. Not least because it links back to some aspects of the history of my particular constituency, which is Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross, which was the area where we were cleansed for cleansed for sheep during the clearances. Absolutely, I made mention of that in my maiden speech. I linked it to the Chagossians. Interestingly, that prompted quite a lot of correspondence from academics around the world who had been doing research on the Chagossians and their right to return to their islands. And I was very pleased to receive all of that correspondence. I think that what that shows is that, we're not dealing with some secret here. We are dealing with an issue that is renowned, it's obvious, It reflects very badly on the UK government. People know that it reflects very badly on the UK government. It stands in stark contrast to everything that we hear them say about the importance of human rights, particularly at this time when they are, and they have been for many years, completely overriding and ignoring the human rights of the people from these islands.
Well, I know that you know you're a highly intelligent and educated man, but the longer you sit in the British Parliament, the more you'll realise that what they say and what they do are two entirely different things. Yeah. Dr. Paul, thanks for coming on board.
Thank you very much.
Sputnik.
Thank you.
Coming up next.